Okay, so after you open the file called Creating Graphs in Excel, the data file, this is what should appear on your screen. Now, if you haven't used Excel before, the first thing you probably want to look at is the tabs up the top here. So this is the Home tab. Now, on this tab you can see that you've got all your formatting buttons up the top here, and also some commonly used buttons here which are inserting and deleting and formatting. If we move along, we've got the Insert tab. The Insert tab is where we get pictures from, and also this is where all our charts are found. So we'll be using the charts quite a lot, so the Insert tab is where you find those. It also allows you to insert hyperlinks, so link to the web, and also insert symbols and equations. Okay, then you have your page layout, so that just allows you to adjust margins and things like that. Next you have your formulas. Alright, so that's when you get into the quite detailed mathematical side of Excel. That will come in very handy. Then you've got your data. This is where you can do things like sort your data alphabetically or from smallest to largest, and some more complicated commands down here as well. The Review tab, that's where you can look up use the thesaurus or the spell check, and some other options in there. We've got the View tab, so that's when if you have more than one document you might be able to view two at once using these Arrange tabs. Add-ins, you probably won't be using that at this stage, and Acrobat you won't be using at this stage either. Really the main tabs that you'll be using are the Home, the Insert, and the Data. They're the main ones that you'll be using. Okay, so let's just stick with the Home tab for the moment. First thing I'm going to do is show you some basic editing and formatting tools. So actually before I do that, I'll just show you how the cursor works. So you can see at the moment my cursor is this sort of fat white cross, and just using my left mouse button, what I'm doing there is just selecting different cells. Now a cell is referenced, you can see here, by the highlighted column D and the highlighted row 6. So that cell there, which has bird in it, is called cell D6. Alright, so this one over here is cell G1. So if I said go to cell E4, I would go E and down to 4, that would be that cell there. Alright, so that's called cell referencing. Now, what I would like you to, going back to the mouse. So that fat white cursor is how you select cells. So if I want to select this row here, or this column, then I just hold down my left mouse button and drag it down. Okay, and that selects. If I wanted to select this column here, do the same thing. Now you'll notice that as I move the cursor around, it changes its shape, or the way it looks. If I hover it on the border there, you can see that it becomes a thin black cross. Now what that's going to do, if I hold down my left mouse button and drag it across, that moves the contents. Okay, so I don't want to move them, I want to keep them there. So that black thin cross moves contents around. Alright, so we'll leave that there. Another thing that you can see happen is, see down here we've got a small black box in the right hand corner. That actually allows us to copy. Now just have a look at what happens here if I left mouse click and drag it down. Okay, now that's a bit confusing actually. Okay, to be honest, I don't really know what Excel's just done there. So one keystroke that is really important and really useful is the Control Z. So if you hold down Control and press Z, what should happen is it should undo what you've just done. So Control Z is what I just pressed, and it's undone what I've just done there. Okay. So I will try to explain to you what that little black solid cross does. Before I explain that, what I want you to do is insert a column. So how I insert a column is I click where I want the column to be, So in this case, I want to actually put a column to the left of column A. So I'm going to click that column. Over here I've got insert, and I'm going to click down, and what I want to do is insert a column. Okay, and that puts the column to the left. The reason I want to do that, I want to number these rows. Alright, so I'm going to start by just pressing 1 and arrow down. That then just moves me to the next cell. 2, arrow down, 3, arrow down, and so on. Now, instead of having to type all those numbers in, Excel is really quite clever. When it sees a pattern, it tries to continue the pattern. So let's try this cursor again. So on the bottom right here, it forms a solid black cross. And if I drag that down, can you see there's a little box with a number in it? And each time I move down one, what's happening is it's adding. It's noticed that I started off with 1, 2, 3, and it's continuing that pattern right down to wherever I want to stop. I release the mouse, and there's my list of numbers, okay, 1 to 20. What else? Okay, so the cursor, the other type of cursor that we can see is this cursor here when I hover between the columns. What that does is allows me to change the width of the column. If I want to change more than one width, so if I want C and D, I select those, and then I change the size of the column like that. They both change at the same time. This little button here, the one in the corner, if I press that, that selects everything on my screen. And what I can do then is hover between the columns and double left click. Okay, now it's a little bit hard to see what's happened there, but what Excel tries to do is to fit the column widths to the information that's in those columns. So B has become really quite wide because of this heading that's quite big. This column F is quite narrow because there was only some digits in there. So at the moment it's not looking that nice. Alright, I'm going to show you some other formatting tools. So this is the heading for this table I've got here. So I'm going to change that so that it spans across both those columns. So if I select both cells and press merge and center, then it centers those words across those two columns. I'm going to do the same for each table that I've got here. Now first of all, I'm just going to make this column D narrow because I don't know why it's that wide. It doesn't need to be that wide. Types of pets, select both cells, merge and center. Age versus height, select both, merge and center. And same with the last one, merge and center. So now when I select all and double left click, okay, that's looking a bit better, but my words have been cut off. So I do need to change these so that it does fit that heading. Okay, now my headings have been cut off. Everything else looks nice, but the headings don't look so good. Okay, so I'm just going to adjust this so that it looks a bit nicer. So what I'm going to do is make the height of that row a little bit bigger, and I'm going to wrap the text in there. So what wrapping does, if I click on wrap text, it just allows the text to be written on more than one line. Alright, now I can make those two columns a little bit wider as well, and that looks a lot nicer. Okay, so I'm going to wrap the text for that. If I hold down the control button while I select cells, it will select more than one. Okay, so if I want to do the same thing to 3 different cells, I can use control to select all 3, press wrap text, and it will wrap obviously the text in those cells. Okay, so we might just make that a little bit wider so that that all looks nice. Okay, next I'm going to show you how to format some of the information in Excel. So the first thing I want to do is put or define these groups of data. So what I want to do is first of all change it so that all the cells have a border. So I'm going to do that for each set of data. make the cells have lines. We can also put a thicker border around it just to make it a bit more attractive. Okay, so I go up here and see how it's got the thick box border, and I can do that. I can do that for the headings too if I want. You can do as much formatting as you want. Okay, now for some reason I've got 2 blank cells up here, so I don't need those. I'm going to select both of those. If I then right click, it gives me the option to delete. Delete is also up here as well, so you can do delete whichever way you prefer. Often right clicking will give you lots of options that you can use. So delete that. Then it asks you what you want to shift. So I want to shift all these cells up, so I'm going to leave that selected. Okay. Now the other thing that I can do is make the headings bold. So what I'm doing is, remember, I'm holding down Control to select everything at once, so that I just have to do the change. So I just have to make the changes once. So I'm going to make that font a little bit bigger. I'm going to make it bold, and while I'm there, I'll give it a bit of a colour. So let's make it blue, green. Okay. Now things have got because the font's bigger, it's now outside my cells. So just to fix that up, select everything, double click on the width, and that should be fixed up. Alright, now the final thing I'm going to show you is the total. Now Excel is a very powerful tool. It can do lots of very complicated mathematical formulas. Now when you want to do a formula, we're just going to do some simple ones to start with. So we're just going to do some adding and subtracting and things like that. Okay, so the first thing you need to do when creating a formula is use the equals button. So when you press equals, you notice that up the top here we get some new options. So up here we've got functions, sum, average, if, and so on. You can use those if you're unsure of how to type it in. I tend to just use the cursor to select data that I want to add or subtract or whatever. Okay, so I've got equals, and what I want to do is get a total for this column. So I use the word sum. Whoops. What's happened there? Okay, let's try that again. Equals, type in sum, and I need a left bracket, and then using my select cursor, I select the data that I want to add together. Close the brackets, press enter, and that's given me a total for that column. And what you'll see is that when you change the data there, the total changes as well, which is really clever. Alright, so I'll change that back to 3 and that back to 1. Actually, let's make this other a 3. Alright, so I want your total there to be 30. Okay, we've also got a total over here. Even though we don't have any data yet, we can still put the formula in. So I know that what I want it to do is, I want it to add everything above, so I'm going to sum, and I'm going to select those cells and close the brackets and press equals. There is another way of doing that, so I'm just going to delete that and show you another way. I can press equals, and what I can do is add each cell together. So I click the cell, then I press plus, click the next cell, plus, and so on. So that's useful for when you're adding cells that aren't necessarily all together. Alright, so, but if they are all together like this one, the easiest way to do it is to type sum and select all those cells. Okay, so that's ready to go for when you put your data in. Okay, the last thing I want to show you before we finish off is these tabs down here. You'll see that there's often, I think Excel starts a new spreadsheet with 3 tabs down the bottom. The first one I've relabeled to data. If I want another tab, what I do is click this little button here, and it opens a new sheet for me. Just calls it sheet 1. If I want to rename it, right click, rename, and call it whatever you want. So graph 1. Okay, and that's it. We're all done.